Well, now that Aquaman has hit the big screen, it is time to dive into those Aquaman spoilers. If you're still looking for a spoiler-free review, click that link and check it out right now. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my spoiler talk for Aquaman. If you watched my spoiler-free review, you already know I gave this movie an A. It was so fun. I had a great time watching this movie beginning to end. I loved the epic quality and epic feel of it because it didn't really feel like a typical superhero movie. It felt like I was watching something that was more mythological and a quest story, and I really enjoyed that whole aspect of the film. Jason Momoa was fantastic as Aquaman. I mean, so many elements of this movie work together so well, in my opinion. So I'm excited to dive into this movie. Dive. You get it? Ocean? Oh man, that's stupid. Anyway, can't wait to hear from you. What did you think of Aquaman? Let's talk about it in the comments. The Justice League connection. That is something that I was looking for. I'm not saying Justice League is the best movie. In fact, every time I watch it, I think I like it just a little bit less. But I don't want the DCEU to ignore it. And I was kind of scared going into this movie that they were going to completely ignore the Justice League. Like, utterly embarrassed about it. They're just going to completely ignore it. So I was really looking for, where do you fall in the timeline? Are you going to ignore Justice League and this is going to be like a soft reboot? Or are you going to acknowledge the existence of Justice League, whether this happens before Justice League or after Justice League? And I thought it was really cool of them to mention, you know, his fight with Steppenwolf. MERA coming out of the water to find Arthur, to tell him about Orm trying to take things over. And she's like, hey, you fought in the great battle of Steppenwolf. This throne is yours. And I'm like, ha ha! I loved it. I loved that connection. I just liked knowing where it belonged. But then there was this other side to it that was really cool. It wasn't just that now I knew the connection and I knew this was after Justice League. They didn't spend time in this movie to build a future Justice League. They didn't spend time to shoe in cameos of the other heroes or, you know, throw in stuff where it's like, hey, look, here's how they could possibly come together. No, this was an Aquaman story. And this centered on Aquaman. It was one little drop of the line to show you that, yeah, this is after Justice League, but that was the only DCEU connection. Like, that was the only extended universe connection. Otherwise, this movie was solely about building this character, and I enjoyed that because I think DC has done their best with solo movies. I love Man of Steel. I think that's a great movie. I love Wonder Woman. Great movie. And now I love Aquaman. Great movie. I feel like this is the DCEU trinity. DC's characters have deep mythology, and I love that they spent the time to build Aquaman's world. Queen ATLANNA, she was awesome, and what was kind of cool for me about her in this movie was I had a different expectation going in because of Justice League Throne of Atlantis. If that's an animated movie you haven't seen, I highly recommend you check it out. I am about to drop a spoiler for that movie. In Justice League Throne of Atlantis, Queen ATLANNA dies. Orm kills her in his bid to take over the throne and get her off the throne. So her death kind of ignites this whole thing, bringing Arthur back, MERA going out looking for Arthur and all of that stuff. And so I kind of figured that was what was going to happen here. And they made mention of the fact that she was sacrificed to the trench. Now, in hindsight, this was a super predictable thing because it turns out Arthur had to go through the trench, face the trench creatures, and get to the center of the earth where the trident is stored. And knowing that she was sacrificed to the trench, it should have been so freaking obvious that she survived and they were going to find her there in the center of the earth. In hindsight. But I couldn't stop thinking about Throne of Atlantis. I just had that expectation she was dead, and that's where my mind was centered on. And so for me, it was like a surprise that she was alive. And I loved what they did with her character. First, they just made her awesome, and the fact this woman could fight. I mean, in the very beginning, when those soldiers from Atlantis show up, my first thought was, that is so unbelievably cheesy. It's like Power Rangers or something. I mean, I just thought they looked terrible. And then Queen ATLANNA started fighting them. And I didn't care anymore. Like, any cheesiness that was there was swallowed up in the sheer awesomeness of her battle with these things. I mean, it was her alone fighting these things. And as she's fighting them, man, what was awesome, no shaky cam. I hate shaky cam. It was a steady camera, and it backed out, giving me a full view of what was going on so I could truly see the fight choreography, and I could just see just how incredibly awesome she is. I don't want to mess with this woman. I mean, she wiped the floor with these guys. So that was really cool what they did there. The other thing that was cool, in the beginning of this movie, she said to Arthur's father when she had to return to Atlantis that she would return to him one morning here on this very pier. And so for all those years now, Arthur's father had been walking down to that pier every morning looking for her return. And so what was so cool about her living is she returned there at the very end of the movie. And I just feel like that ended this movie on such a high note of hope and light. And it's like, you can't accuse the DCEU of being dark anymore. That was such an amazing little ending and a great way to round off a story. And I really enjoyed that. The Aquaman. The Aquaman himself. Man, I gotta tell you, one of the things I loved about this movie was how Arthur Curry kind of reminded me of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. And this kind of is what adds to the epic feel, because Aragorn from Lord of the Rings didn't want to become king because he was afraid of the weakness in his bloodline. He was afraid he'd make a huge mistake, he'd succumb to the power of the ring, or any number of things. He didn't want to take the throne. And throughout the trilogy, it's kind of his growth and his maturing and realizing he needs to take the throne. And there was something very parallel and similar to me about Arthur Curry's journey to the throne, and it really just drew me in. First, this guy had a fantastic character arc. I went, at the very beginning of this movie, because when the pirates take over that submarine, and it's Black Manta, right before he becomes the Black Manta, and he's a pirate with his father, and they're like killing everybody on the sub, and Aquaman shows up to save the rest of the people on the sub and all that stuff, and he gets in the fight with all the pirates, which was a really great scene. But when the father was like buried under that rubble and Aquaman was leaving and Black Manta says, "Please have mercy, help him," and Aquaman says,
"Ask the sea for mercy."
I was like taken aback. I was like, dude, you're a superhero. Save that man. But they did a good job of really letting you see that these pirates were bad people, killing innocent people all over the place. So you understand Aquaman's reasoning. He's like, no, I'm not gonna go save that guy, and he leaves him there. But what does he do? He creates an enemy. He makes a true enemy out of Black Manta, where King Orm is making Black Manta his fall guy, saying, I'll pay you for this if you take out MERA and you take out Aquaman. And so, I can't do that stuff legally. Legally, MERA's supposed to come back alive, but if you take care of it. So Black Manta kind of has this, like, underhanded role, but Black Manta doesn't even want to take the money because of the emotional pain of the fact that Arthur Curry could have, with his incredible strength, lifted the debris off his father and saved his father. But Aquaman had no such mercy and did not save his father, and now he created an enemy, Black Manta. And that epic scene in Italy where they fight, I mean, my gosh, that scene is just incredible. Again, another example of the fight scenes where no shaky camera like backs out, lets me see the choreography and all that stuff. But later after that, he's talking to MERA and he's talking about, you could have died today because of me. Because I couldn't have the mercy on his father, and so I created an enemy. If you had died, it would have been on me. And so it was this huge growth thing. So finally, when he goes down to the trench and he goes into the center of the earth, discovers that his mother's alive, and then because he's the king, he alone has to go through the waterfall and face the Carathin, which to me was another kind of Lord of the Rings epic moment. Reminded me of Aragorn taking the Dumalt Road and, trying to command the armies of the dead. So he goes in there to face this Carathin to test his mettle and test what's really inside. First off, I didn't even realize that was Julie Andrews. Freaking hysterical. She was awesome in that role. And she's sitting there telling him how unworthy he is, and he's like, oh, I know I'm unworthy, but I have to be here.
I came because I have no choice. I came to save my home and the people that I love.
And so as he goes into all of that, it really shows what's inside, and then she's like, whoa, you can understand me? And she lets him go get the trident, which is the final test of what's in him and if he's worthy. And he takes up that trident, and he is worthy! And this is the other reason I really wish the trailers didn't show the original Aquaman suit, because the build-up to him claiming the trident and claiming the Aquaman suit is just amazing. Like, that wasn't in the trailer, so it was awesome to get that build-up. But how great would it have been to have the double whammy, the surprise of the original suit and the epic build-up to him getting that original suit. So that was just incredible. But that was the other thing that won me over to this movie, was his character growth. That he starts as somebody that let Black Manta's dad died. He had no mercy, and thus he created an enemy. But that's not how he ended. He grew, and he became a king and a hero, and I loved watching his character arc and his growth. There was something interesting with MERA and powers. Now, I liked MERA. I thought she was really cool. Loved her ability to control all that was liquid, and that Italy fight scene where she controlled all the wine in the bottles because it was liquid. Like, that all that stuff was just so incredibly cool to me. But what was interesting about that, the most interesting thing was she was kind of taken aback by Arthur's ability to speak to fish and the sea life. So she thought that was interesting, and he thought that was interesting that she can manipulate water the way he did. And I thought it was interesting because I'm like, what, does that mean Atlanteans have different gifts? So we know the lowborn can only exist underwater. The highborn can breathe in water and on dry land. And now, like, MERA controls liquid, Aquaman speaks to fish. So what else is out there? Do people have different gifts? I kind of wish we dived into that more, but this really isn't Lord of the Rings, so we don't have 3.5 hours to dive into all of that. But I was just kind of curious to know more about that. But anyway, all of that was just incredibly interesting. All that to say, this movie gets a solid A from me. Love the fight scenes, love the choreography, love the visuals, love the story, loved Aquaman's story arc. I just overall really enjoyed this movie and what they did. In my opinion, this is DCEU doing what they're best at, building the mythology around the one character in this solo movie and spending time to attach us to that character. And if they do more of that, man, we're gonna love another Justice League movie because we're gonna be far more attached to the characters as we dive into another Justice League movie. If we ever get there, who knows at this point if that is ever gonna happen. But what do you think? Did you like Aquaman? Do you think the DCEU is now on the right track? Let's talk about that in the comments. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian and hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next movie review, ranking video, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.